Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Simply Trade Roundup. My name's Annik. I'll be your host for today. I hope you like this one because I have a guest with me, and I am very happy to have support him, guys. I'm just honestly really excited for this episode and just to see what his journey has been like and how he got to where he is, and talking a little bit of the industry now. So, with no further ado, I am joined today by Eric Johnson. He's from the Journal of Commerce. So Eric covers the kind of issues, that matter most right now: logistics, technology, AI, the way trade leaders are adapting to all of it. And honestly, I thought the refunds would be the biggest topic at the conference I was at recently. No, it was AI. So it is just insane to see. Thank you so much for being here, Eric. I'm so glad to have you on, truly.
Thank you so much for having me on. Looking forward to this. It's funny, I was at an event this past week too, and the two sessions I spoke on, my terrible joke, I keep making is you can't spell tariffs without AI.
Oh my, you should have not told me this. I wish I would have came to this on my own, because then I could actually use it without feeling
I
bad.
mean, it's
And
not.
now I'm never going to use it. And
No, you're welcome to use it. I'm sure I stole it from someone. So
no, it's okay. So I want to quickly jump on this. The World Cup is coming up. I know you're a huge soccer fan. Um, you know,
football.
it's Fußball. I know. It's soccer. I'm trying to be.
I'm in the state.
Who is your team? Who are you rooting for? Are you going to a game?
You're opening up a huge can of worms to start this off. So I'm a fan of beautiful football, I would say. So like I've always gravitated toward teams that I enjoy watching, not
Mm.
necessarily. So unfortunately, the US team is not usually the most enjoyable to watch. I mean, it sounds like a front runner, right? Because Argentina won the last World Cup, but I've been a huge Messi fan for as long as I can remember. And Spain, because I've been a fan of all the Barcelona teams. So like most of the Spanish team now, and even in their best period, like 15 years ago, it was mostly a Barcelona team. So the way they play is just mesmerizing. And that's what I'm sort of drawn to. I'm not going to a game because I am doing a not so silent protest about how ridiculously corrupt and greedy FIFA is in every possible way. So I just don't really feel like spending 3 hours in some waiting room to buy overpriced tickets to a match between two countries that probably don't even belong at the World Cup anymore. And also none of the games are even in my hometown. So I'd have to travel somewhere to watch an overpriced game in 90-degree heat between two teams that, 10 years ago wouldn't have even been able to qualify. So that's my rant over.
A lot of people feel the same, and also I feel the same, except I love to watch Germany, except when they lost against Mexico. I would say that the World Cup kind of aligns with trade because, countries have to work together to make something happen, and that's how trade world works. Now, how did we get here, right? Now, I kind of want to start from the beginning because getting into trade is not easy, and getting into trade is also just kind of odd. And how do we do that? Now, when you were young, what did you want to do?
Yeah, nothing to do with trade. I didn't read the business section growing up. I was like not interested in this at all. I always traveled as a kid. So I was lucky enough that my parents loved to travel and they took me a
Yeah.
lot of places when I was younger. And so traveling and like other cultures and was always a big part of my life. So you would have thought I would have like gravitated toward a job that wanted to do that. No, I just wanted to be in sports originally. Like I'm a huge sport fan. So at first, when I was a kid, I loved basketball. That was my initial. So I thought I was going to be a basketball player, and then I stopped growing. And so I was always like writing came pretty naturally to me from an early age. So I started, kind of thinking journalism or something in writing reporting would be. So I thought I would be a sports journalist. I did that, like internships for that in high school and college, and worked for the school newspapers doing that. But actually, it made me not like sports to report on them. And there's some specific reasons. Like you start when you're at a game, instead of like enjoying the game, you start thinking, I hope this game is over soon so I can finish the story. Or you hope that like there's not a big comeback, because then my story that I've written mostly, it has to change.
Hmm.
So you sort of root against the thing that like got you into the sport to begin with, the exciting moments. You want it to be very boring and like straightforward. So I realized I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to enjoy sports independent of like what I did as a job. And so I went into reporting and it ended up after I think on my second job, I ended up covering the ports of LA and Long Beach for a paper in Southern California and got exposed to the industry and right away just sort of loved it. I didn't really know why I loved it, but I just kind of innately did. And then 2 years later, I got hired by a trade publication called American Shipper. And I got to travel. I got to start traveling up and down the US West Coast and then abroad and lived abroad for a bit. And then by that point, it was like I couldn't think of anything else I wanted to do.
Yeah. Is that when you went to the University of Leeds, or was that
That
before?
was in between my two jobs. So I worked for a newspaper in Southern California. I went to University of Leeds in the UK for my graduate degree and then came back. And when I came back, the job covering the ports was there. And then after about 4 years, I moved to India for 5 years.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. I mean, so many different cultures. I That makes a lot of sense to where you are now, because I think cultures kind of connect trade in a way trade runs, right? And you writing about the current happenings in trade is kind of culturally charged in all senses, right? I mean, the United States kind of fuels how trade runs in a very different way than Europe does, or India per se. So how did all the traveling kind of affect your writing or your writing style? Like, did you see a difference from other writers that might have not had this experience that you had, or did you differentiate yourself in the style you had while writing on trade?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that before, actually. I think I thought about how my writing has changed over time from a couple different other dynamics. Like when I started off writing about trade, I was writing to like a very general audience because it was really about the impact that the ports were having economically on the like local region. So I wasn't writing about it from like a trade practitioner's perspective. Then you have to flip when you go to a trade publication because you're writing for professionals in that industry. So you have to know a lot more. You can't fudge the details in any way or they will call you out on it.
You're not a trade. I mean, I don't want to claim that you're not a trade expert, but you're obviously not doing the work that trade people are. You're not an importer. You're not. uh,
Totally.
Where do you get this deep dive in?
Osmosis. I'm like 23 years in now. So the best thing you can do as a reporter is surround yourself with people who know a lot about the topic you're writing about and
Yeah.
just have as many conversations with you as you can, read as much as you can, and it builds. It's like a repetition thing and a build like a foundation thing because no expert is an expert straight away. They're an expert because they did a class and then they did the thing that they took the class for and they talked to people who had done it before so you accumulate this understanding. And so to me, our unique position as reporters in the industry right now is that we don't do the thing that we report on, but we get to talk to 1,000 different types of people and types of companies. And so that's our advantage is we get this survey of the industry that like someone who's even in it doesn't necessarily get because they're used to talking with this partner upstream and this partner downstream and they get those two views. And then maybe they go to a conference and get a little bit more view. But their day to day is generally just like, they're part of the pipeline. So you know what's above you and you know what's below you. But for us, like we're more horizontal. Like we're looking, we're talking to forwarders, brokers, customs brokers, shipping lines, ports, terminal operators, consultants, software, the whole and shippers, of course. So that's our kind of superpower is that we get this like very horizontal view of the industry.
I understand you 100% because I'm very much in the days or years of my career, but in trade per se. But you definitely described the way I'm feeling doing this. I talk to people and I'm like, wait, I kind of already know this because this person just told me this, and they told me, from a different perspective. And now you're telling me this, so I see your mismatch, and I see how you guys kind of don't align in working together. So it's kind of interesting. But going back, and I love that you said that because I think it makes you so much credible. So going back to to my other point of you, bringing your path kind of into how you write and how you differentiate yourself with different writers, because I think that's kind of what made you step into probably your role and becoming who you are in the industry, because you are widely known. So how do you think the culture aspects that you learned along your way have impacted the way you write?
It's a great question. I honestly have never thought about it that way. So it's actually, I'm probably going to have some like epiphany a week from now that I'll have to like tell you and you can insert it
Please
into
do. I would
lower
so
color.
love it.
But,
I would love it.
I think that so good writers, or I should say good reporters, are either really good writers, like technically they're great writers,
Mm,
or they're really good interviewers and they have a good set of sources and they're an okay writers, but the information they get is amazing. The
yeah.
best journalists are both, right? And I say that for the question you asked is like when you only talk to people in a certain like geographic region, the answers are going to be like kind of very understandable on what you expect. And yeah, maybe they give you a piece of information you never heard before, but like the cadence of how you speak to them would be very familiar. I
Right.
mean, in the US, there's the differences, right? Like someone in the South, in the extreme South, talks differently than someone in
Yeah.
Brooklyn versus someone in Chicago, right? But overall, like I'm gonna have the same types of conversations. If I'm in Europe or if I'm in Asia, and especially if English is not like their primary language, I have to ask questions in a certain way and I have to expect that they're going to convey information in a way that's different than I would. So I would say like the biggest thing is making sure that you are being true to what they say, knowing it's not necessarily their first language. We have the good fortune in America and the UK of like everybody speaks our language and it's not the other way around. That you have to show a lot of like grace to like take what could be incredibly insightful information from someone who's maybe not able to convey it as well as someone who's like they've spoken English their whole life. So that's definitely something that I've had to learn. Like you don't want to quote someone directly when it's a little stilted in English. That's not fair to them. Like they speak better English than I do their language. So why should I portray them in a bad light? You know?
Yeah.
So their ideas have to be represented well by your
Yeah.
writing. So I think just like immersing yourself in other cultures also gives you like a much more rounded picture of the world.
Yeah.
And that's only going to help you write with more authority and more like empathetically, because you're not just going to have this very narrow view of the world. You're going to be like, oh, I remember I had a conversation with someone in China and I remember I had a conversation with someone in France and they looked at it this way. And so when you're sitting down to write, that's going to be in the back of your head. Like, let me try to capture that in some way.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because I think in trade we also, or logistics or any sort of industry, I think it is best to know your environment truly. And if you're doing international business, you need to understand your customers, you need to understand who your importer, exporter, all that is, because there can be miscommunication, cultural differences, misunderstandings. So just in that sense, it makes sense. Now, you started, writing. How did the information change from then to now? I'm saying, you know, what were you writing before that maybe now you're not writing about anymore? And maybe now you're writing about something else. And I have a big feeling that's going to be AI, but just if you want to.
Yeah. So I'll sort of answer your question in two ways. So I actually have this very maybe counterintuitive take on this. And I've said this before in podcasts, so I'm not necessarily breaking new ground here, but I think it's interesting the way you phrase the question because I think what I'm saying applies. There's a lot of like the superficial kind of wrapper around things that feels like it's changed a lot from like say when I started 20 years ago. But the core job of someone in our world has actually barely changed. So if you're on a transportation team at a shipper, you still have to do the same five things that you did 20 years ago. If you're at a customs broker, you still have to file entries with CBP or whatever the customs agency is. And you have to go through these steps. And yes, the system may be a little bit different that you're using and the system that customs is using may be different, but like the process of the job is kind of still the same. So to that extent, it hasn't really changed all that much. Now, I think the pace of how things develop has changed a lot. So you were referencing AI. AI feels like it's shrinking the time between like mini evolutions in the industry. Because I remember a few years ago, I used to think of like technology and trade and logistics as like three different phases. There was like the 90s ERP phase where companies like started using ERP and getting their all of their systems sort of in order or their processes in order in a structure. Then 2010s was like the TMS phase.
Yeah.
And also everyone got to grips with like doing stuff on a browser rather than like this other system that you had to log into. And then the 2010s were all about VC, like what that entails. These are very clearly about AI. This is the decade of AI, but the things are happening way faster. Each like development is happening way faster than it did in previous.
Sure. Uh-huh.
So I think that's one thing. Now, like my job is to write and to like give information, get information to be from people and give information to other people. That job has changed way more than I would say the logistics director's job has changed.
Really?
Because, well, so I started my first job with a newspaper was 1998. I think we had three internet enabled computers in an office of like 40 people. Right. We were using the AS 400 green screen type thing. And even by the time I was like working from a laptop at home, writing stories for a trade publication like 7 years later, it was still like anything that happened in the world of logistics. There was maybe 5 global publications that were writing about that stuff. Like no one cared about container shipping and no one cared about what customs was
Really?
doing.
Everyone cares right now.
They cared about customs in like the mid 2000s. They cared about customs from like the security perspective because it was right after 9/11.
Yeah.
If they
Yeah.
didn't care about customs like we care about customs the way we do now. So at some point, probably during the pandemic, but way earlier, the internet just made like it sort of democratized access to information for everybody. So companies started doing blogs and independent reporters started just, they didn't have to get hired by a publication. They could just do their own thing. And so you had a lot more sources. And then in the meantime, the mainstream media started caring about trade and logistics a lot more. So they started covering it more. And then you had the pandemic, and obviously everybody started caring about it. So if I look back in like 20 years, I go, you could write a story. You had days to write a story 20 years ago before anyone even cared about it
Yeah.
because you didn't have to worry about anybody else writing about it. Now, something comes out with tariffs. I'm like, is it even worth us writing about? It's been on 30 different publications instantly. Everyone's talking about it on LinkedIn. Do we need to write a story saying exactly that, or do we need to find a different angle to go after? That's the difference now.
How do you get that different angle?
Well, I'd like to think that like having experience helps.
Make you think differently, right?
Yeah, so you know kind of like what maybe an operational problem might be rather than just the fact that tariffs changed. You go like, oh, what's the impact going to be? Having a good network of sources is probably the most important thing. The more people you talk to and the more intelligent and high and like it doesn't even have to be like high level. Sometimes CEOs are the worst people to talk to, honestly. You actually want the person who's dealing with the thing that you're writing about to be the one to talk to you, even if they have a very unimpressive title. Having that network of sources that can tell you either ahead of time before you even know it's a story, or you want to do a story and you could ping them and be like, hey, am I crazy or is this going to happen because this happened?
Yeah.
That's how you get different stories.
That is so interesting. No, I love what you had to say, and especially the way you twisted it that everyone is kind of doing the same job, which is so true. Only that it might be optimized more with AI right now, right?
Yeah, certainly. I wouldn't even
Which
say AI, right? Like automation has been happening for a long time. And automation isn't necessarily like you don't need an LLM to have done automation, right? So like that's what I'm saying is that the jobs, the same processes are happening. That maybe just some of them are faster, some of them are the same, but
Now, I want to touch on TPM a little. You're highly involved, obviously, and you can and share more about that as well. Now, it's become a major industry touch point. Major AI tech companies go, to optimize kind of the services, that utilized and the service providers that show up at TPM. So big connections are being made. I think I talked to Peter Tershwell on this as well. How many connections are happening, and even before the conference. So it's just like such a big networking event with attractions. You have podcasts there. I mean, it's an insane event. It's amazing. So, how do you see this role evolving as the market changes? Has it been bigger? Do you see more interest, or what are you trying to do with the conference essentially?
big questions. Once what we like think about every time we finish with TPM, we're kind of like, we put our heads down for like a minute, and then we're like, okay, now let's start thinking about next year's. So this event, Peter was the right one to talk to. It was his brainchild.
Yeah,
We 6 years ago. This event has evolved from being sort of a small gathering that was very focused on one particular thing, which is ocean freight contracting between shippers and their carriers and forwarders.
which I heard is happening.
Yeah, that still happens. That's still very much the core of the event. But what it's evolved, it used to be that all of the program needed to have was how many ships are on order, what ports are going to be congested, like operational things that might affect what the rate that was to be negotiated behind closed doors is going to be. The world we live in now is so much more multi-dimensional than that. It doesn't only matter how many ships are on order. It doesn't only matter how much demand there is from shippers. It doesn't only matter how many shipping lines and freight forwarders and ports there are. You have wars and trade policy changes and economic swings and ahistoric patterns, right? So it's evolved over the past few years and pandemics, right? It was just probably the thing that most kind of like shook us out of this idea that this was just a shipping event, right? So you have to be able to have a program that reflects that shipping and trade sit within this extremely chaotic world where there's a bunch of things that are out of control of even the biggest companies in the world that affect their cost and affect their ability to get product from one place to another. So it's evolved from a program perspective to be reflective of that. But at its core, it's still about, as you mentioned, it's still about people meeting each other. Like theoretically, all of this stuff could be happening over Zoom over the course of the year. But it doesn't, as we all know, it's like, I think we scheduled this like 3 weeks ago, right? So it's difficult to align schedules. And you imagine like a shipping line with thousands of customers trying to schedule Zoom calls with all of those customers. A, that's difficult. And B, you don't get the same sort of commercial give and take on a Zoom call as you do when you're sitting across the table from someone. So it's always been about getting the industry together so that they can figure hard and easy stuff out, in a short period of time, right across from each other while the program is going on and kind of like highlighting the things in the market that should matter to them. So how does it evolve? It has to evolve in a way that's true to that, what it is, right? As soon as it stops being that thing that's made it successful, it will stop being successful. So it has to be, whatever innovations happen have to be like in service of that, of what's made it successful. So like for me, I report on tech. I've been trying to figure out for 7 years, 8 years, how tech can be reflected in the TPM experience. And the number of vendors serving the market has grown. The number of vendors that want to get in front of that audience has grown. And it's also, I think, the realization is that like, you can't disentangle tech from the industry as a whole, right? Like everything runs on some piece of software now. So that I think is an idea that like is slowly where it's slowly been integrated into TPM. But I think the industry, whether it's right or wrong, still thinks of itself as a very antiquated industry. So there's still so much more to do. And you can only like beat people over the head so much with this stuff. A good example is, and sorry, I'm going on and on, but
No,
a good
please do.
example is like, for a long time, we tried to capture what like the industry's carbon footprint and sustainability would mean to the industry, right? And at a certain point, you have a session, and you're just looking out and it's just vacant stares. It's like they've heard this before. They know they're supposed to be more sustainable. They know that they're supposed to, but the message was just not being received after a while. And
Mhm.
so you have to, you have to like sort of tell people in a way that they're receptive to and not preach to them and not feel like they're being, like lectured to in a way.
Yeah, like, I have to do this, great. Like, I don't want to. I'm gonna
Yeah.
spend money.
Yeah. Yeah. That's tricky. It's very difficult. I don't know if anyone's gotten it right.
No,
Cause
I don't.
if you go too overboard, then it looks like a marketing exercise.
Yeah,
If you don't go far enough, you're sort of like, oh, well, they don't even understand how important technology is? So it's
yeah.
a very difficult kind of thing to balance. And I wouldn't presume to say I've gotten it perfect at all. So it feels so big too. The AI thing is just like looming over us in such a weird way because we're supposed to be endlessly excited about it, but it's also like it just feels so heavy in so many different ways. I mean, I talked to 1,000 different vendors into my space, and a good, several dozen of them are identify themselves as AI companies, right? And so an individual company can have the exact right message, but you're one of literally tens of thousands of companies marketing the idea of AI. So if everybody else is marketing it in a really scary, oppressive way, like it doesn't matter how well you're marketing it. Like most people are leaving all these other messages too. And they're like, oh, I'm terrified of this. No way
Yeah.
I'm going to believe what you say. So it's
I think it's
difficult. It's
talking to
really
the right
difficult.
people, connections, talking to the right people, getting your message, showing understanding, showing all those things. It's cumbersome in the way you just have to. And I think for you too, if you provide so much information on tech, like they're gonna be like, oh my god, he's just taking over the tech, everything is tech.
True believer.
So, like, how do you change that? And that's such a fair message. And I feel like a lot of people in the industry just kind of feel this way, especially if they don't believe in AI, because there are people that don't. Now, I kind of want to run around this up with, how should the leaders in this industry balance the investment in tech, with the need for resilience and flexibility, because you still want to stay true to who you are, but you obviously want to keep up with
Yeah.
the industry or with what other competitors are doing.
I mean, it's interesting you asked that because I think that's kind of like my reporting tries to be through the lens of like ultimately what do people need to invest in? Where do they need to
Yeah.
invest? Not necessarily what specific system, but like what is important for them to invest in. And it totally depends to me at least, it totally depends on the type of company. So for me, like 3PLs above all have an absolute mandate to invest in this, to be super progressive, proactive in investing because
Okay.
most of them don't own freight. Most of them don't own assets. So if you don't own any of that stuff, all you are is a service company, which is fine. It's great. But like if you're only a service company, you have to be investing in tech to be as efficient in servicing your partners and your customers. So you have no choice, I would say. The
Okay.
choice has been taken out of your hands. Question is like,
I
what
love that.
well,
Okay.
then the question is like, what do you invest in? Where do you invest? How much do you invest? And I'm not going to be able to generalize. Like every 3PL is at a different
Yeah.
state of that. But so the mandate is really strong for them. I think if you own assets, especially big, expensive assets that are difficult to replace, obviously you're going to be investing in first and foremost in tech that helps you get the most out of that asset. Because no matter what they say about pleasing customers and customer first and delighting this and that, the most important thing as an asset company is I've spent this much and I probably owe this much. And so what software can I use to help me get the most out of this thing that I've bought or leased or taken on debt to own, right? So to me that's the first priority. On the shipper side, I think it's actually interesting. Like I think there's something to be said for shippers being a little less experimental and like a little less sort of on the cutting edge. I actually think it's more of like an incentive thing where the the shippers are the people that everybody else has to serve. The asset companies and the 3PLs that are asset light,
Yeah.
ultimately their customer is a shipper, whether directly or indirectly. So if I'm the one that everybody has to serve, I'm going to be the least aggressive in spending money on my own technology because I think where I can get those companies to sort of like innovate on my behalf, where I can get them to like take the scars of trying new stuff that is a little not yet tested, I'm going to let them do that. And
Yeah.
if they bake it into the price, they bake it into the price. If they give it for free, better. But like that's something that I don't have to have on my balance sheet, and that's something that I get a benefit of being the customer. Now, that's not to say that they can't just like have a notebook and paper and that's enough, right? Like obviously, there's basic systems that you have to run your business with, but like when we're talking about AI, I'm not really sure, and I may be totally wrong on this. This is just my feeling. I'm not really sure the benefit of like experimenting far and wide with AI for a shipper makes a ton of sense versus like letting their partners kind of like take the lead on it and show them what works and what's best.
Yeah. I'd like to ask a shipper about this. I like your standpoint. I don't know. I think it's hard for me to know, especially because there's so many AI providers. But it would be interesting to see a shipper's perspective, one that doesn't use AI and one that does. Like, what are the differences? Who is, are they more efficient? Are they more risky? Do they have more, I don't know, complaints or errors? That'd be super interesting.
One thing I didn't even bring up is like if you're dealing with the government right now,
Yeah.
especially in trade,
Yeah.
that's probably an area where as a shipper you want to be investing because there's no fudging that stuff like that. You have to be has to be airtight at this point. And so
Yeah.
and you better believe governments are investing in this stuff. So if you're not at an equivalent level, then you're probably placing yourself in a little bit of risk in a way that you aren't if for instance, like you're relying on a forwarder to invest in like some software, like some spot quoting software, right? Like that's just a commercial advantage. It's not like, oh, if we get this wrong, we get a $20 million fine from CBP or someone goes to jail, So
Yeah. I think you bring up an interesting point. I think smarter tools also need smarter people in that sense. I mean, I bring this up on the podcast all the time, but one of our sponsors or our main sponsor is Dual Training Center, which is how people get trained. And just making sure the people that are using the AI or the people that are in the company, while the AI operates, know what the AI is doing and how to fact check it and how to, make sure that if there's exceptions, there needs to be someone that knows what the exception is and how do we deal with this exception. So many interesting points, and I think people will listen to it and probably because the way my head is spinning is like I have so many questions, not for you, but that it left us like
generally,
thinking to later on address, and I think that's both good for both of us because you're going to go to your desk and I need to find a person I can get on the podcast so I can talk about that, which I kind of love. We're kind of in the same boat in that sense, but
totally. You get to talk to smart people all the time. What's a better job than that?
that's what I say. I love it. I feel, you just feel empowered and smart with the information you're getting. Like you today, the information you gave me, I have questions that I need to research and I'm going to feel smarter after this. And so,
Well, no guarantees, but I appreciate it.
no, truly I do. And I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's such a pleasure. And, I haven't met you in person, but hopefully we get to meet one day. I'm sure that'll happen and it'll be exciting. And maybe we'll see where the industry is at that point because it is changing within seconds.
We'll get you to TPM soon.
Please do. Please do. Well, Eric, thank you so much for coming on. And if you, the listeners, want to find Eric, you can definitely find him on LinkedIn. But thank you so much. And we'll be back on Monday. So thank you. Great. Bye.